good to be here. My name is Steve Collins, along with my wife Karen. We live in West Fort Worth, just about as west Fort Worth as you can get from here. And we're glad to be here this morning. Joining us are Allie and Jude. Jude is our grandson. Allie Morrison and Jude Collins. They are students at Texas A&M in Commerce. And so they came over to join us this morning. We're really glad to see them. And probably means I'm going to have to buy lunch a little bit later on, right? Okay. So we're really glad to be here and worship with you this morning and preach for you. We have lived in Texas now almost 5 years. I was on staff at Lincoln Christian University as Dean of Students and Professor of Bible. And Karen was on staff as in working in student development, especially with the girls, in being the head resident of the girls' dorm for 15 years before we moved down here. A good mutual friend that you and I have is the older Mark Barrier, your preacher Mark's father, Mark, who I think has probably preached here through the years, or at least been here. In 1967, when I went to Lincoln Christian College, Mark was my big brother. And later on, he was my Greek teacher. He didn't really, I didn't learn much from him. It wasn't his fault, it was mine. But through the years, Mark and I have just been very, very good friends. And when he retired at Dallas Christian College a few years ago, I actually went over for one semester and taught the classes Mark had been teaching. It had always been our dream to teach together, but he retired and I taught his classes. But I only taught 1 year at Dallas just because the commute was absolutely horrible between West Fort Worth and downtown Dallas. I really enjoyed that, made a lot of good friends there. And so that's kind of who we are and why we're in the area. And we're just delighted to be with you today and be able to preach for you. I'm going to be preaching, speaking, teaching from Psalm 77. If you'd like to locate that in Scriptures, we're going to talk about it as it being a song. I'm going to try to break it down. We're talking about songs in the night. This song that the psalmist was able to sing in the night that made all the difference in the world in his life. A few years ago, I was in a meeting with a friend of mine, and over coffee, this man was a very, very influential businessman. I trusted him as my mentor, and he led me to think in some ways that I never thought before. And we were sitting at breakfast one morning in a Starbucks coffee shop in Houston, Texas. And he looked at me and he said, "What gets you up in the mornings?" Well, I thought what he meant was, what are you worrying about that wakes you up in the morning? What he meant was, what is it that drives your life, that gets you going in the morning and gets you out of bed and gets you moving? I misunderstood what he had to say to me. Now, in Psalm 77, when we get there in a minute, there is a phrase that is a little bit like that. It has a twist of meaning in the Hebrew understanding, in the Eastern understanding of language, and the way it was written in the Hebrew. There's a switch in a meaning there that's a little different than the way it comes across, and you will see that. In verse 6, when we get there, it's going to read, "I remember my songs in the night." And in a casual reading of that, it seems like what the psalmist is doing is referring to the things that keep him up at night, the things that worry him, the things that bother him, the things that make you wake up in the middle of the night and go, what in the world am I going to do about this? And there is some of that in the song. But it's really the song in the night that the psalmist is talking about is really the songs that he has that allows him to sleep at night. And we will see that. That's what happens with a deeper look at the song, that God delivers the singer from the songs in the night that bother him. It's very much like what David said in Psalm 32:8, when he describes it like this: Lord, you are my hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with songs in the night. I think that's what he is really saying. So with that in mind, I'm going to read Psalm 77, and then we're going to go back and look at it as the song that it is, and we're going to look at it in 4 verses. Now, the verses in the song have some more verses in the scripture. Now, I'll explain that when we get there, and try to break that down. Here's what the psalm writer, actually this is one of the songs of Asaph, who was the choir director of Israel. This is not a psalm of David, it's a psalm of Asaph, who was the choir director. That's all we know about him. We don't really know who he was. But here is the song that he was singing. Listen to these words. Psalm 77. I cried out to God for help. I cried out for God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night, I stretched out untiring hands, and my soul refused to be comforted. I remembered you, O God, and I groaned. I mused, and my spirit grew faint. You kept my eyes from closing. I was too troubled to speak. I thought about the former days, the days of long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. My heart mused, and my spirit inquired. Will the Lord reject forever? Will he never show his favor again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed for all the time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? Then I thought, to this I will appeal. The years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will meditate on all your works and consider all your mighty deeds. Our ways, O God, are holy. What God is so great as our God? You are the God who performs miracles. You display your power among the peoples. With your mighty arm, you redeemed your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. The waters saw you, O God. The waters saw you and writhed. The very depths were convulsed. The clouds poured down water. The skies resounded with thunder. Your arrows flashed back and forth. Your thunder was heard in the whirlwind. Your lightning lit up the world. The earth trembled and quaked. Your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters. Though your footprints were not seen, you led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. Now, we're going to take this and break it down in a series of 4 stanzas or 4 verses in the song. This ancient choir master of Israel writes this song. We don't know the reason or the occasion. That's difficult to fix. In a previous psalm, it depicted preservation from some mighty oppressor. This psalm seems to be an unknown oppressor. He is faced with some terrible calamity. The psalmist resolves to cry out unto God in prayer into the night. He's certain that God will hear him. He seeks God both day and night with outstretched hands in a posture of prayer. In other words, he's in constant, continual prayer about what's going on in his life. And he begins to ponder the glorious record of all the mercies of God that he remembers in the past. And that's important. That's vital to understand. The glorious record of the memory of the kept promises. So we come to that time in our times in our lives when we wonder, what's God going to do now? How's he going to get me through this? How's he going to handle this situation I'm in? And you remember those promises. One of my favorite verses in all the scriptures comes from 2 Corinthians 1, verse 20, where Paul says, for no matter how many promises God has made, they are all yes in Jesus. God made thousands of promises in the Bible. Literally thousands. Paul says they all come true, and they all come true in Jesus. Now that's a whole sermon in and of itself. Matter of fact, that's a whole series of sermons. Matter of fact, that's a whole book of sermons. I may write that someday. I doubt it, but I might. All of God's promises. Now, what the psalmist is saying is, I rely on those promises that God has made. Now, while the psalmist did not yet see that Jesus was the answer to all those problems, he was able to see that God, in fact, had answered all the promises and had been with him all those times before. So the relevance of that memory of knowing all the past times that God had helped him allowed him to be able to understand that in the present situation, God would also take care of him. So, here's the psalm in 4 verses. Let me read these words to you again, because in verse 1 of the psalm, in the first 3 verses actually, but in our song today that we're going to sing, it's about promises and distress. The psalmist does say, I'm in trouble. I've got a problem. I'm in distress about something. Here's what he said. Listen to these words again. I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God to hear me. When I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night, I stretched out untiring hands, and my soul refused to be comforted. I remembered you, O God, and I groaned. I mused, and my spirit grew faint. These words are called a lament. The psalmist is lamenting. He's in distress. He's focusing on the either real or perceived problems. It is a time of intense longing to see and to hear God. It's when we get to that time in our life when we are honest to God. When we say, God, I'm hurting. God, I've got a problem. God, my family is. God, my world is. It's when those times in our lives when we really, it's just me and God. It's just God and me. And sometimes, for me, I confess to you, that's in the middle of the night. When you wake up and say, Lord, how am I going to deal with this situation? How am I going to deal with this problem? How am I going to deal with this issue? How am I going to deal with what's going on in my life? In those times, when we have trouble and crisis and storms and sickness and grief and danger and those things that are going on in our lives, there are times when you wonder, is God here or is he afar off? At least that's what the psalmist was doing. Now, for this singer, for this psalmist, could have been a time of private distress or national calamity. A lot of commentators believe that this is actually a psalm from the time of the exile, when the people of Israel and Judah were in exile in Babylon, and Babylon had taken over the whole world, and they are in very, very distressful situation. That it does sound like that in the psalm. It's those times in our lives when we are in a time of trouble, when we're at the end of our rope, when we don't know how God's going to work things out, when we're overwhelmed, when everything is just kind of snowballed in on us. There are times when we cry out to God from the depths of our souls, when we have nowhere else to go but to the Lord, and we have no one else to turn to but the Lord. I've been praying very much in 2 situations just recently. One for a friend, one for a family member, who are both in situations where, what do we do next? What do we do next? One of them had a heart transplant yesterday and came out really well. The other one is still waiting for what they're going to do about the cancer that he has. See, these are real issues. We have those. But we see what God has done in the past, and then we ask, God, what are you going to do now? So the question I have for you and me today is, have you ever been there? Or maybe we're there right now. Maybe that's how we feel right now. Or if we don't, I guarantee you, you know someone who does. If you're not waking up in the middle of the night wondering how God's going to do things, you've got friends and family who are. I do. Here's the second verse of the song. It's in verses 4 through 9 in the text. It's about the questions we have. We have the distress. That's the first verse. The second verse is the questions we begin to ask. Listen to what the psalmist said. You kept my eyes from closing. I was too troubled to speak. I thought about the former days of years long ago. I remembered my songs in the night. That's where the sermon title comes from. I remembered my songs in the night. My heart mused and my spirit inquired, will the Lord reject forever? Will he never show his favor again? Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger held his compassion? It's when the psalmist in his deepest despair got to the place where he was actually saying, God, where are you? Now, he'd remembered what God had done in the past. But we find ourselves crying out saying, what are you going to do to help me this time, Lord? Too troubled to speak, unable to sleep, we remember and we think about the past times he has helped us. When we, in our despair, wonder, what's he going to do? Then we remember our songs in the night. We remember, oh yeah, I remember what you've done before, Lord. See, he's our rock. My favorite word for this is, he's our Ebenezer. I just love that. I just love that word, Ebenezer. Back in the Old Testament, in the ministry of Samuel, the Israelites had lost the ark. And Samuel went and brought the ark back. And when they did, there was a great time of thanksgiving, and they were all praising God. And Samuel set up a stone, and he called it the Ebenezer stone. And it simply meant, thus far, God has helped us. He got us this far, he's going to get us the rest of the way. I love that. And so when we're in those times when we wonder, how's God going to do this? We say, Ebenezer, he's helped us this far, and if he gets us this far, he'll get us the rest of the way.
Amen.
That's what's going on in this psalm. So, the psalmist cries out to God. He seeks the Lord. He stretches out untiring hands. He remembers, he groans, and then he thinks, oh yeah, my songs in the night. Lord, you've helped me before. Now, you're going to help me again. So it is in this song of the night that the singer muses, inquires, and even begins to question God. Sounds like he's questioning God. It's not unlike the enslaved people of America in the last 2 centuries, when often those slaves would meet at night to sing out to God in the night after they had labored in the field and endured beatings and experienced separated families, poor living conditions, and all the iniquities and indignities associated with depression. They sang what we call spiritual songs in praise of deliverance and the spiritual songs. It is a challenge to sing songs in the night when you're enveloped with despair and you feel that your suffering is unfair. But sing they did. Out of those songs in the night come some of the best known songs we've had in the church today, like this. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Swing low, sweet chariot. Go down, Moses. And here's one of my favorites. He's got the whole world in his hands. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. And one of the most famous ones that came out of those spiritual songs from the slave people was, let us break bread together on our knees. They sang in the night because they remember God. The questions are interesting. Will the Lord reject forever? Will he never show his favor again? His unfailing love vanish forever? Has his promise failed for all time? Has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? I mean, when you're in exile, when you're in pain, when you're hurting, you begin to ask, Lord, what's going on? Now, it's interesting here in some of the word usage. Has God, where's his favor? Where's his mercy? Where's his just kind of general love for us? But then there's another word here. When it says, has his unfailing love vanished forever? This word unfailing love is the Hebrew word hesed, which is it's the word for loving loyalty. It's the word which means God never leaves us. That God is always there. That he's always right there for us, taking care of us. It's a very special word. It was a very special word that was not used in any other context other than God with his covenant people. See, God loved everybody. God had mercy for everyone. But God's hesed, his unfailing love, his loving loyalty was only for his covenant people. And he took care of them. And they trusted in him. And then that next verse, has your promise failed forever? Those are rhetorical questions, and the answer is no. God, you haven't rejected us. You haven't quit showing your favor on us. You haven't quit loving us with unfailing love. Your promise has not failed. What the psalmist is actually doing here is using these rhetorical questions to remind himself that God is with them. We actually find confirmation in these things. Maybe once in a while you sing this newer song here that says that Jesus is our way maker, our miracle worker, our promise keeper, our light in the darkness. That's who he is. So the singer, in his distress, in the middle of the night, is able to sing out to the promise maker and the promise keeper that he has confidence in his unfailing love. Lord, you've promised, and I have faith that you will take care of us. So we can sing that old song. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He takes care of us. Think about that. While God has the whole world in his hands, and he's taking care of every problem that the world has. Just let your mind think a minute about all the problems that the world has today. God's taking care of every one of those, and he cares about every little pain that Steve has or that Matt has. He cares about every little thing going on in our lives. Oh, he's taking care of the whole world. That's what this psalmist is singing about in the middle of the night. Because you see, verse 3 of the psalm, verses 10 through 12 in the psalm, 10 through 15, here's what the psalmist sings. Then I thought, to this I will appeal, the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember the miracles of long ago. I will meditate on all your works and consider all your mighty deeds. Our ways, O God, are holy. What God is so great as our God? You are the God who performs miracles. You display your power among the peoples. With your mighty arm you redeemed your people, the descendants of Jacob and Joseph. To this I will appeal. I will remember the right hand of the Most High. I have a feeling that what the psalmist was referring to there is when Abraham and Sarah were told that in their old age they were going to have a child. And Sarah laughed. And God said to Sarah, is the Lord's arm too short? Do you not think I could reach out and touch you? Is the Lord's arm too short? No, my right arm can reach out and touch you. There's nothing too hard for God. I have a feeling that's what the psalmist is talking about. But all these things that he brings back, all these miracles, all these times that God had been with them in the past. This is the idea that faith looks beyond our present problems to see hope in the future based on the past. So here I am, right now, with this problem. God, how are you going to deal with this? Well, here's how you did it in the past. I have trust and faith that you will do it in the future. So we begin to understand that there is no distress so deep that we cannot bring it to God. Because after all, you see, he's God of Jacob and Joseph. To the psalmist, he took care of Jacob. He took care of Joseph. He took care of the psalmist. He took care of Peter. He took care of Paul. He took care of Dorcas and Lydia and all those saints throughout history and the people you and I know in the times past in our lives where he has taken care of us every single time. And he will do that again. Because, you see, he is the God of creation. He is the God of the flood. He is the God who parted the Red Sea. He is the God who parted the River Jordan. He is the God who allowed women to bear children, barren women to bear children that would usher in the promise of a virginally conceived Messiah. What miracles he has already done. He healed the sick. He made the lame walk. He raised the dead. He promised us that when he returns again, we will rise from the dead to join him forever in a heavenly restored kingdom. That's the God that we serve. Amen. So the story of God, his word and his Bible, is what Timothy George calls a notebook to help us with our spiritual amnesia. When you get to the place in your mind where you think, how's God going to help me with this? Here's the notebook. Here's the notes that tell us that God has helped us for at least 6,000 years. And he will keep on helping us. Here's the last verse. The water saw you, O God. The water saw you and writhed. The very depths were convulsed. The clouds poured down water. The skies resounded with thunder. Your arrows flashed back and forth. Your thunder was heard in the whirlwind. Your lightning lit up the world. The earth trembled and quaked. Your path led through the sea. Your way through the mighty waters, through your footprints that were not seen. Though your footprints that were not seen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. The last verse is about God's power in all things. God's power. You did all these things. And the psalmist just begins to rehearse all the things that God had done in the history of his people. You marched us through the Red Sea. You took us through the wilderness. You took us across the river of Jordan. You helped us occupy the promised land. You built the temple. All these things that he had done in their life. So, we have songs in the night. We have laments of lostness. We wonder, how's God going to do this? But we also have that song of peace and that song of hope that we can sing in the dark night. After all, another psalmist would say that the Lord takes us through every dark shadow, even the shadow of death. That's our God. That's who he is. And when we realize who he is, we remember who we are. We are his people. And he takes care of us. And in the night, when we're singing in distress, what we can really do is sing in triumph. It's really interesting. I had a text early this morning from the wife of our friend who had the heart transplant yesterday. And her text this morning was simply her singing the words in the text. Singing the words about how great God is. All night long. 7 hours of surgery. And she's praising God for how great He is. And that's what this song is all about. So, in conclusion, don't you love it when the preacher says in conclusion? It doesn't really mean anything usually, but it does. Our God, for all these years, can be seen, and even can be seen in our lives, watching over His people. He is our refuge. He is our deliverer. He is our shepherd. He is the God who takes care of us, even in our darkest nights. He is the God who takes care of us. That allows you and I to sing songs in the night. And even Matt to sing those songs like The Wonderful Name and who Jesus is. Because that's really what all of this is about. Would you pray with me?